our organization is involved in promoting Newfoundland music and dance, storytelling and songwriting, and I've always had this idea, or this dream of doing a film on Newfoundland songs. And during the pandemic, we were working with Ian Foster, singer-songwriter, director, filmmaker, and I had just seen Ian Foster's film Voyager. That's a short film, animated film, and those ideas came together of doing a film about Newfoundland music, and after seeing Ian's film, I realized that it could be possible as an animated film. And that would be the most practical thing to do during the pandemic anyway, but all the ideas came together then after seeing that. And then the pieces came together after talking to Ian. He suggested animator Kamadi, and I was in contact with illustrator Caroline, and the four of us really got together and put together the film during the pandemic.
Great, yeah. The animation is such a good. It really started to come out during the pandemic when people weren't able to get together in person. So, really nice to be able to see all of those films now coming to the festivals. So, thank you very much, Eric, for that. Nancy, how did again, like both of you have your films are very strongly visually. Very strongly have strong visuals to bring across the story. How did the visuals enhance the musical experience of what you were doing, and what was it like working with such a visually focused director?
Yeah, it was great to work with a visually focused director. One of the things that's, well, let me just tell you a little bit about the music, first of all. I mean, this music by Jessie Montgomery was written during the pandemic. At the very beginning of the pandemic, she's based in Manhattan, and she was just sort of coming to terms with the isolation and the coming to peace with the reality of how isolated everything was and the unknown and all of this and this new landscape that everyone was dealing with. And so yes, the music is called Peace, and the music itself takes us on a journey from sort of sadness and loneliness to sort of acceptance at the end. And what's so amazing about Nikki, we've worked with her many times, is that she's a dancer, choreographer, as well as a filmmaker and a visual artist. So she really gets inside the essence of the music, and I think just brings even more meaning to the music through the visuals and the journey that she takes us visually with this film.
And was there much collaboration between you and Nikki on like kind of what you thought the visuals would look like, or did it line up with kind of how it felt to play it?
No, I mean, I didn't have any input in terms of the visuals whatsoever. I mean, she listened to us play it a lot and probably listened hundreds of times to the piece. And then, yeah, there was this concept of that we actually filmed it in this hall here, and there was, projections behind us and all of that. But we heard, the ideas of how it was all going to come together. But yeah, it was Nikki's concept completely, and Nikki's here in case you want to join in.
Yeah. Let's hear it for because a great film, very interesting style to it. And for both of you with this blend of music and visuals, what do you kind of hope the audience feels when they experience that music and the visuals that you chose to accompany it? I'll start with you, Eric.
Well, Tuka Kopan is a sort of an iconic Newfoundland song. One of the things that came out of this is that there's so many people have such a love of this song. I hadn't realized, the illustrator, said that was her favorite song. When we approached Kevin Blackmore about singing it, he said it was his favorite song. It was just like everybody everybody want to be involved because it sort of creates such a visual image when you see it and you hear it. It was a natural song. Now, one of the things that we wanted to accomplish with the film was to help promote Newfoundland songs to young people. So we were hoping that it will be used in the schools, and we're planning to do a teacher's guide for the film. So one of the things that we're hoping will come out of it is just bringing attention to Newfoundland songs, Newfoundland songwriting, and to filmmaking. So we're actually trying to accomplish that with the little film.
Okay, great. Yeah. So will there be? Do you have plans for animating more of these songs in the future?
We would love to do that. This being a new venture for Soundbone, we really don't know if we have the wherewithal to do more. But I guess it all depends on the feedback that we get. If we can get positive feedback and generate more interest, and we would like to do a series of them.
Okay, so everybody talk about it. It's word of mouth. You're improving the education of the province by doing it. And Nancy, what did you feel like you wanted people to take away when they listened to it, especially being closer with the music?
Yeah, I mean, I think this sort of genre that Nikki's created here is kind of unique. I mean, it is a music video in many ways, but when we often see classical music videos, it focuses on the performers and is trying to make them look really like rock stars and all that stuff. But this, is really about the story of the music. And, there was like a real sensitivity to the beginning of the music, which starts out with something more kind of jazzy and urban. And then there's a shift right in the middle of the piece where it starts to sound more sort of like Debussy or something like that. And that's when we start journeying towards Newfoundland, where we see at the very end, the landscape with the mountain and how we got there. I mean, sort of rambling here, but yeah, I think this is really exciting. Like that there can be a way to film classical music that tells a story that's really based on the music and the trajectory of the music. There's
so many stories that you see written, and they have the points, they have the beginning, middle, and end. But I know, like, even for myself, sometimes it can be hard to hear that in music. So do you think that's kind of the overall takeaway, like people to kind of watch that and see that journey and kind of listen for that in other musical pieces?
Yeah, and it's subtle. I mean, it's not it's not telling sort of a really clear narrative story that doesn't really connect with the music. That's kind of what I often see with sort of some music videos, but that there's sort of a story imposed on there to kind of, but this, yeah, I mean, hopefully it's sort of something that's a lot more integrated and based on the essence of the music. So, yeah, that's
Great.
what we were after.
Okay, well, I think it succeeded. So thank you to Eric and Nancy. Let's hear it for them. So now I'll invite Minerva Marie Navaska, Sean Wainstem, and Peter Collins. Come on up. Yeah, there we go. Welcome.
Nice to meet you. Most seated QnA.
You have to sit down. It's very nice. We went through a lot of trouble to bring this couch in, so we're going to use it every day. If anybody comes here in the daytime, I will be napping across this couch if you have any questions for me. So for this one's for all of you. Each of your films deal with some very heavy themes, but in the end, they all kind of manage to come out with hope. Can you talk about the decisions to go that way with the film? Was that something that you discovered throughout it, or was it a goal from the beginning? Start with you, Minerva.
Sure. I kind of, knowing that the film was going to be reliant upon the use of the interviews. All of the interviews are candid, by the way. Like, my parents or whoever else I'm talking to, they didn't know that they were being recorded at that time, but they did give consent to be in the documentary beforehand. So it's like completely fine. But I wanted to make sure that whatever we were saying, it would follow the structure of what these phone calls would usually mean to me. And with every goodbye, I would say thank you, because that's only natural. People are taking the time out of their day to make sure that I get home safe. And I think it wasn't a narrative point. It wasn't like anything that was inherently political, because I can see how the film itself has like such strong messaging regarding like women's bodies and like sexualities. It wasn't an overt message. It was just something within real life that managed to resonate with my creative team and the audience, thankfully.
Great, thank you. Sean?
Same question.
Same question.
All right. And my film was Demon Box, which you might have guessed from my voice. There you go. There you go. So yeah, I mean, the film started out as a 10-year-long process. So it started out as this little nugget of a movie with this kid and his grandfather and magic realism stuff that happens. And then one of the things that happened was like, oh, I'm going to have a kid now. And this film about generational trauma felt really disingenuous to not figure out how it's going to be carried forward. And then that opened up like, okay, well, what happened in between those things? There's suicide attempts, some other stuff. So like, how do I address that? And I mean, the film is a fucking mess. It's a mess. It's like, but I mean that in a good way. And it's like, there's a lot of just pushing out ideas and things, and to me the biggest positive takeaway for it is that it's better to talk about the stuff in a mess than to not talk about it at all. So that was, I think, the optimism there, and trying to find, I hope it's optimistic in that I'm still here, but I don't know how it's gonna fuck up my son. Like, so, depending how, I'm glad to be here to try and make that less bad. But we'll check back in a bit.
We'll see. Maybe not as full of hope as we thought. Peter?
Yeah, well, I had read about the phenomenon of bereavement hallucinations, kind of where someone going through a period of grief after losing someone may hallucinate that person. And I thought that was a very interesting staging point to center a story around. But I definitely wanted to input like a positive message in there, because, I mean, we all need more of that in our lives, I think, positive messaging. So, yeah, no, I definitely went into it with that intention, for sure.
Okay, of crafting it and kind of bringing it to that hopeful
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Great, okay. So, Minerva, with Guardians, how did the lack of a traditional talking head interview kind of shape the way that your film the way that your film was structured?
I wish my editor was here, because we both lost our minds trying to figure out how to structure this film without the traditional talking head, because I feel like that became a big problem that we didn't account for in the post-production process. Not only figuring out what do we put in this blank space of time that isn't just more walking footage and more feet close-ups, but also figuring out what these images mean, like symbolically and in service to the narrative. I forget the original question. I'm so sorry.
You were totally answering it. It's just about how that decision affected the structure. So what was it? Did you know from the start you wanted to do it candid, like kind of without them knowing?
Definitely. Yeah. It brought up a lot of problems in post in terms of figuring out how we're going to package the stories and the messages that these calls make. But ultimately, I would say that it was worth all the hassle and the figuring out and the experimentation, the long experimentation process.
Great, thank you. For Sean, your film
Yes.
evolved alongside your own personal growth. So how did that process affect your view on filmmaking and storytelling?
I'll see if I can figure out the question in there. Yeah, I think I grew as a person by making the film, and I think that's ultimately it didn't get into a festival, and that triggered this re-examination of the whole film. And then at the end of the day, it's spending that amount of time on it, and spending that time within that trauma wasn't necessarily healthy, but because at some point I'm going back and recording stuff and like going to my closet and shutting the door and like just talking for hours, and I'm like, now I'm just bawling, and I didn't expect to just be bawling at this one point, and now I'm trying to edit in my bawling at 3 a.m. and it's not working, and I'm like, oh, my tears are not good enough. It's another, I've failed again. But somewhere in there, I did come around to seeing my parents with more compassion and growing as a person, and I think that's why I tell stories, is trying to figure out who I am, and like whether it plays at a festival or not. Thank you for playing it. The more important thing is to grow with the people I'm making it with and grow myself. That feels critical, and I'm happy to be able to. I think I went into it with like, I'm going to tell a story about this, and this is going to help some people, and this is a thing, and this is my journey. Maybe there's something, if like one person hears it and it affects them, that's great. Which is still true, but it still feels like the more you can stay true to yourself in the telling of the story, something more genuine comes across. Was that an answer?
It was a great
Okay.
answer. That's fantastic. And was it a lot of? Did you find it a lot of back and forth between your first film? Like did you take a lot of time in between each?
10 years.
10 years. Was it 10 years of constant eyes peeled up and staring at the screen? Or?
You know, it was my my son was born. We were able to raise funds, lost funds, raise funds. Your grandfather passed away, and then you're like, there's this pandemic that happened, and then it was like you wanted to see all that effort on a big screen too. So not wanting to put that at a festival, and then when there's time to do festivals and having it rejected, it's like, oh, then you're just spending more time with it. So there's a lot of reinvention and examination, and like, is all this thing worth it or not? It's some other health and family stuff happening at the same time, and that's sort of all wove in there. And for a hot minute, I'm like, this film is gonna always be in flux. There will be a different version forever, and every festival will have its own version. I'm like, that's a horrible thing to do to myself and the people around me. It's like, oh no, I got to record another one. Here's where it is right now, and hello Wyoming. This is my
Right.
But that form is something I hadn't seen before, so that alone made it worthwhile to do that and have something that's interrogating the film during the film. And some people and some places get it and some places don't. When it does play, it generally seems to resonate, which is really nice. But yeah, it's like kind of hit or miss if people get it, so which is fine.
Cool. Thank you. Peter, grief is a really central theme in your film. How do you hope that this film contributes to conversations about mental health?
Oh, jeez. I'm just taking a second to compile my thoughts.
Yeah, of course.
Like in particular, the grief in my film is centered around a woman's dealing with her husband's suicide, and I just feel like that in particular is something that is probably on a wider scale felt like one of the more tragic ways that someone could pass away, because I think we can all feel like we somehow could have helped the person possibly or something like that. And I've lost what the original question was. I'm sorry.
Just talking about that greater conversation about mental health. Was there kind of a thought behind how your film would move towards that conversation, or?
Well, I wanted to showcase in particular that, like, grieving is healthy, and it's necessary to go through grieving, but it's also, you can spiral down into your grief and it can become unhealthy. So I wanted to show that there's a grieving phase, yes, but you also have to healthily complete the grieving process and become healthy, like mentally healthy, because if you're kept down in that spiral, I think that's probably very damaging to your psyche and whatnot.
Yeah, and that's showing through with your original goal to bring it up with hope at the end.
Yeah, I when I first conceived of the project, I wanted to have an uplifting ending of where you should keep the memories of those that you've lost with you, but that doesn't mean staying in the depths of the deepest stages of grief, you know.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about grief-based hallucinations.
Yes.
Was that something you discovered after you came up with the seed for the film, or was that one of the seeds for the film?
That was one of the original seeds for the film. I initially conceived the film as a horror short, actually, where the hallucination was more of a tormenting figure. But then I partnered that with the uplifting ending, and it kind of morphed into the project that it is right now.
Great. All right, thank you guys. That was really great. Thank you so much for
you.
that. And now I'd like to invite up Paul Colburn of Not Fit and Ashley McDonald of September 7th, 2012. It is a low couch. So thank you both for being here. I hope the screening lived up to your expectations. Both of your films focus on highly personal experiences. How did you find the courage to share those stories so openly? And I'll start with you, Paul.
Well, it's not really my story, it's Daryl's story, but myself and Daryl have been friends since the early 90s. And when I returned, back then we all partied, we all did drugs and everything, but we all moved on. When I came back to Newfoundland, to St. John's in 2016, I met up with Daryl, and he's so emaciated, and and he was telling me that he was in recovery, but I discovered afterwards he was still in active addiction. And we sort of rekindled our friendship on a different level, right? I didn't give him a lot of money, and I didn't, there was a couple of times that I would get a phone call from Daryl saying, "I'm down to CBS and I need to get a cab back to St. John's. I need $40. First time, oh, sure, I'll send you $40. The second time, you sort of pull back a little bit. I just thought Daryl was very open to talking about it. And he had no problem when I turned on the camera to just go. He was very, very open and very okay with telling his story. And he's very self-aware, and he knows what he's doing to his body, but he's just trapped. And like he said on the Water Street thing, he said, "Well, why do you do it?" They do it because they're a slave to it. And it literally is a slave relationship. You really need to do these drugs. And it's not a weekend thing. That's, just go get some Coke and get some beer and go, party. It's not that way at all. It's a real need to do that. So Daryl had no problem just opening up and giving you his story. He was supposed to be here tonight, but I don't know. I tried contacting him several times today, and there was no answer. So I don't know what happened to him. I'm sure he'll appear in a day or two.
Well, it was
Yeah.
great to hear his story in the film.
Yeah.
Ashley, can you speak to that, to the, how you sort of found the courage or the inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just that I don't really have a lot of forethought. So I was like, oh, this will be cool. Right, but then also I've now created a thing that has to go into the world. So there was just a big part of like, this will be fun. oh, people see it. So yeah, just that part. But also, like, this isn't the courageous part, right? Like, this isn't it. Like, I'm good, right? 10 years ago was when I was doing stuff that was hard. This is the easy stuff now. So I don't see this as courageous in any way. I see this as like kind of closing chapters, being finished with the part that I guess people would consider courageous.
Okay. And that kind of leads into the next question. Your film focuses a lot on healing through sharing with others. And how did that kind of method, like closing those doors, how did that contribute to your own healing?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't think that I thought it was going to be as effective as it was. I was a bit surprised. I knew I was setting out on a thing and being like, okay, this might be a great next step. We'll see where it goes. And then, yeah, I got towards the end and I did feel better. And I did think differently about September 7th, 2012. And I did have this new community of people. And I've always had a huge appreciation for my community who's supported me this whole way, but I had an even bigger appreciation for them. Like, we saw the thank you list, guys. Like, that's on purpose. It definitely worked better than I thought it was going to. I definitely thought I was going into this being like, this is going to like make me feel a bit better. It's going to be another thing in the journey. It's another step. But yeah, it was actually much more effective than I had anticipated. And it's been a really, the last like year-ish since we kind of like finished the bulk of it, has been really a lot lighter and a lot easier, I'm not going to lie. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Paul, yourself and Daryl have a long relationship, as you said. What was it like working on this project together? Like, how did it come together?
Oh my God, we went weeks without talking to each other and hating each other, and we've known each other so long, but there was a big time that we were separated as well. But in Halifax, we were really close, and back to St. John's, we're close again, but on barriers that I've set up, because he's in active addiction. It was. I found myself like asking Daryl more and more, like when he would agree to something, and I tried to rationalize whether I should have done this or not. The scene where they're actually smoking crack, I asked to get in by buying him a pack of cigarettes. Now, is that a bad thing? I didn't buy him drugs. I didn't buy him alcohol. I bought him cigarettes. And I thought that was probably the lesser of any evil, that he gave me access to actually film it. The other gentleman that was there didn't want me there, so I defocused his face. But yeah, that's what I found it. It's like Daryl is a showman anyway. And you turn on a camera, he's going to perform. And if he's going to perform as an addict, he'll perform as an addict. So he even said it a couple times that he found it very cathartic. And there are things that he said that he never really thought of before. So yeah, that's why I found it. It was like it was a love-hate relationship for a long while, and I found myself pushing a little bit more each time. I said, well, let me film some of that. Let me show me some of that, Daryl. And he said, no, you can't do that. And eventually he did. So, yeah.
Okay. And I guess all together, what's the big takeaway you'd like people to sort of walk away from the film with?
That addicts are not partying all the time. as much as you might want to think they are. They're suffering. I mean, Daryl does at times use the old "it's a disease" thing, and it's a disease, but you have to make an effort to cure yourself. And I'm still not 100% sure whether I'm right or wrong on that, but I found myself. Daryl would say, "Oh, you can't blame me for that. It's the disease that's doing it." And yeah, but it's you. And I was really, really confused. Like, who's talking here? The addict or is it Daryl? And I found it really confusing that way. So, yeah. What was the question again?
Just the takeaway.
The
I think,
takeaway,
big
yeah.
takeaway.
It's that these are not people that are, they're people you know. And there are people that you love, and they're not just out partying and everything. It's a real problem in our society. And, just be aware that they're out there. And even in St. John's, like, I couldn't believe it. It's like, when I went to university here, I mean, there's loads of pot, and there is, at the point that MMDA was starting to come around, but cocaine, not that I know of, maybe there was lots of cocaine, I don't know, but now it's everywhere. Like Daryl says in the film, it's like, there are so many people addicted to cocaine and using cocaine in St. John's now than ever before. So, just remember, these people are not partying. They're not having a good time. They're really, really hurting inside.
Great. Thank you. And Ashley, the same question. What's the big takeaway you'd like for people when they walk away from the film?
Find strangers to make your life better. No, the big takeaway is that community makes a difference. From start to finish, the last 11 years, it's been, everything that I've accomplished has been because of my supports. Everything that I've been able to get through, move through, push forward on, it's all because I've had a community around me the whole time. And for this film in particular, then, I met a whole new community. Just in case people don't know, I actually didn't know any of those people except for Rolanda beforehand. And Rolanda and I only knew each other professionally before this. So those folks all just showed up to do this. So what you do as a part of your community and how you support other people really does make a difference, and it really can impact people's lives in a very big way. And realistically, we're talking about, I have gone from, those worst moments and feeling so alone and, in such a dark space to here. And I attribute it entirely to the community and the supports that I have. I would never have been able to do any of this without them. And so, what you do matters.
Amazing. That's a great way to leave it here tonight. Big round of applause for all of our filmmakers here tonight. Stick around, mingle, ask other questions. I know I couldn't have gotten to everything here tonight, but thank you everyone for coming out, and we'll see you tomorrow.